Good morning, Anahi.
Morning, Dan.
What do we feel like talking about this week?
Today we're going to talk about private school versus public school, splurging, and reverse mortgages, as promised.
Welcome to the Science of Wealth, where we discuss the science behind financial planning and the art of learning and applying it.
As promised, I feel like that's such a tee up there. Is it just reverse mortgages that we promised, or is it everything?
During the last podcast, we ended the podcast with talking about with the bad reputation that they had, and I mentioned that this was going to be my next podcast topic, so here we are.
I gotcha. Okay, we'll save the best for last then. So let's talk about
Yes.
private school versus public school.
Yeah, so for families, I feel like one of the biggest decisions that parents have to take is how their kids get educated. And private school can be hundreds and thousands of dollars from what I've heard. So I can just wanted to hear your view on private school versus public school. And is private school an investment or luxury? How should it be considered?
I think it's really going to depend at the end of the day on kind of what the primary impetus is. So I think we want to differentiate kind of two circumstances of private school, just aside from public v private. So two separate circumstances that I think affect this beyond just core education. One is going to be a specialty school. So going to, let's say, a school for artists or gifted students who have a particular skill set or notion, private schools that are for children with special needs, different things like that. I want to move away from the specialty domain because I think that's its own topic. And then I think the second version of this is just where there is a gross and material gap between the quality of local private schools and public school options. So, for example, you have certain school districts that are just whether it's through their fault or not, or policy or funding or whatever it is, but you can look at school districts, you can look at how they rank nationally, you can look rank how in their state, you can look at how this high school versus that school even performs within a district. And I think if your kids are doomed to go to a public school that is one of the worst, there's a good case to be made for private school because you're like, hey, I just don't think my kid is going to get a good education in this public school. The other version of this I sometimes hear is about safety. I don't know of or think of any private schools as somehow being magically safer than public schools, but that's an argument you hear sometimes. So I want to exclude those two fringe cases from this conversation before we get into it.
I've heard a lot about like private school, how it can help education, but I've also heard of a lot of districts like Same Brain District. I've heard that it's really good as well. From the years that you've worked with clients, what is the cost of private schools around here, like an average?
It depends. So, like, there are both private for-profit schools, and then there are private, like, religious or cultural schools in the area. I've seen it be as little as like $10,000 a year for more of the religious upbringings, like a private Catholic school, a private Jewish school, that sort of thing. I've seen schools be anywhere from $30 to $50,000 on the more like private for-profit. And the private for-profit argument is usually like that it's a private school and it's academically excellent. You'll get a better education there. For the religious schools or for the cultural schools, it tends to be more about like just the type of education, not necessarily that it's like intrinsically or especially better, but it's like, hey, I want my kids inculcated with certain values or beliefs as part of their education, and so I want their education to reflect that. So again, I've seen as little as a couple $1,000s a year, where it's more of like a stipend than like a really serious cost, and I've seen cases where it's literally as much as like a full teacher's pay for the year just for one student.
That is crazy. How do you help clients think about the opportunity cost of private school tuition? The things that they could be doing other than putting their money into private school as opposed to doing something else that they could be doing.
I think one of the first things to point out is that there's not a lot of good research that shows that spending per pupil has a strong relationship with quality. So, for example, schools in places like New York City famously spend an enormous amount of money per student, and they are not materially or statistically significantly better than schools with less. There's definitely a cliff effect where if you spend too little, the education just suffers. I'm sorry, we can't afford whiteboards or power or food. There's certainly schools that don't have enough money, and that affects the quality of education, but there's there's not a strong data set that shows if we spent $50,000 per student, the students would all be geniuses, but if we only spend 25,000 per student, they'll all be morons. There's no spectrum like that in a serious sense. Those numbers are also pretty exaggerated. I think per pupil spending tends to be more in the $8 to $12,000 range for a lot of places. But all of that to then say, when we think about the opportunity cost, I think the biggest thing to point out that is that unless we have one of those fringe cases where again you're in a terrible public school district, but there's good private schools around you, unless you're in one of those fringe cases, there's not really a lot of data that shows kids who go to private schools are substantially more likely to get into Ivy League. There are differences for certain target schools where that's their entire value proposition. If you spend $120,000 sending your kid to this super special academy in Connecticut, they're almost guaranteed to get into an Ivy. That's different. But I'm talking about everyday private schools that you see all over the country, most of which are not particularly exceptional. They're just not public.
So what is the difference between or like what difference do you think it causes for a student looking to go to college for somebody who is in private school and somebody who is in public school and has great grades, is very involved in everything? Do you think that causes a big difference?
I think more than anything, what you're going to see as a difference in certain private schools versus public schools, particularly when you get to the high school age, is you're going to see more of an emphasis on college preparation as a value proposition of the institution. So, for example, like at a lot of private schools, you would see built in SAT prep, built in ACT prep. Part of your education formally is going to be training and teaching you to do well on those tests because there's such a strong relationship between those tests and acceptance to top tier institutions. Whereas in public schools, you might get a little crash course, like a quick talk through or something, but you're probably going to have to pay to take a prep course outside of school. And it may be even held at the school, but it may be something you have to pay a couple $100 extra for to go and get that SAT, ACT prep. That's something my parents did for me is they spent, I think, like $800 to send me to an SAT prep course where for 4 weeks I was going after school and they were talking about like how the SAT tests and how the scores are done and techniques and strategies for being smarter about how you take it. But that was an a la carte purchase versus something that was built into the educational opportunity. I think the most interesting thing about the private school value proposition is that what the data shows as the strongest value outcomes, like the correlation causation thing that gets into what does private school really do well, it helps kids from lower income, lower socioeconomic class families do substantially better. So that's the interesting thing is that if you are from a well-to-do family that has money and resources and all of that, private school doesn't really actually have much of a distinct effect that does not get fuzzy with the relationship between the fact that your family is not a broken family or a blended family or that your family already has money and resources to begin with. You don't see a big difference between private school kids from families with money versus public school kids from families with money. What you do see is that kids who are from these lower socioeconomic school classes who get a scholarship or get some sort of sponsorship to attend a private school have enormous benefits from going to private school because it is accelerating their kind of climb up the social ladder earlier in life and giving them some schools and some or not schools but skills and opportunities that they may not have accessed in public school but that are assumed things that you're going to get from a public or private school environment.
You mentioned a couple things that I think, like for example, the SAT prep, that's not directly already included in public schools, but it being already included for the private school, that's already very helpful. The whole purpose of those preps is for you to do good at ACTs, better ACT, you get more help for college, and ultimately that's what everybody wants, just getting more help for college. And then as far as like lower socioeconomic families going into private schools, I've had a couple of friends who ended up going to private school and they've made it big. They went to Michigan State and they graduated this past year. So I can see the connections there. And I think that it helps for certain people. And then I can also see how for students of wealthy families, how it can just be like the norm for them and not try to get the most out of all the resources that it includes, since most of their family might have already gone to private school.
And again, it's just a step up, right? So let's use an example I think anybody listening to this would understand. I think we all implicitly understand that if we went to a place like Eton, which is the fancy college that like the royals go to in the United Kingdom, we would not fit in. Like you and I, we would be absolutely out of place there. We would not know how to behave, what to do,
Yeah.
like what decorum was. We'd be getting in trouble all over the place. We'd get bullied senseless, like all of that. But if we somehow went there like from a young age, even though we're not from families that have any exposure to high British society culture, we would obtain a lot of those skills by being there. And we would also build a network with people who were from families that were used to sending their kids there. So those network effects and those sort of cultural inculcation effects can be really powerful for folks. But again, it's this sort of raising people below the average up to the average of that institution, as opposed to having a better average in general. And that's not to say that there are better people who go to private schools and people who go to public schools are lesser. I'm a product of only public schools my essentially my entire life, including my university time. I went to three public universities for undergrad, grad school, and my doctorate. So it's not to say anything bad about public school. It's just saying that the advantages of private school tend to be in niche cases, not necessarily it's just like a universal, if you go to private, it's better, and if you go to public, it's worse.
Interesting. So kind of to close it all together, if somebody can afford private school, do you think or do you recommend right away to go to private school for their kids?
I don't really have a recommendation from a financial planning standpoint. The thing that I talk to clients about more is what is the cultural and life experience and perspective you want your kid to grow up with. I think Carl Richards asks a really good question on his podcast, 50 Fires, and he asks of a lot of his guests. It's one of the first or second questions he asks most of them, which is, were you one of the rich kids or one of the poor kids growing up, and how did you know? And if you are the richest kid in public school because your family makes $1 million a year, you're going to know. But maybe if you went to the private school, you'd be average. So there's something that parents, I think, should think about, which is not just the educational outcomes and that sort of thing, but also what is the message? What are the values you're trying to instill in your kids? Some parents want their kids to feel very normal. Some parents want their kids to feel special, excuse me. But ultimately, that's the question that I think is more important is what life perspective do you want your kids to gain as part of their educational journey? And how would public or private school impact that journey?
It's really up to the parents and how the parents want their kids to grow up and go through school all the way to college. So it all makes sense.
Yeah. And that's just part of it. Right? Sometimes we've got enough money that we just say we can afford it, so let's do it. And I see a non-zero number of clients make the decision to send their kids to a private school just because they can, and more power to them.
Okay, my next topic is a fun one. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, but wanted to talk about splurging. I feel like we've all bought something that felt amazing in the moment, but then over the weeks, over the days, that excitement kind of wears off. You were just looking for that adrenaline of getting something, and once you have the money, you're able to ultimately get whatever you want. I question all the time, it's like, why don't clients spend more on their happiness or more on the things that they love or just something fun that they want to do, like having the ability to spend that money.
The research is pretty clear that experiences create happiness, not possessions. I also then, in contrast to that, really like the joke that you can money doesn't buy happiness, but you'd be happier crying in in a yacht than a rowboat. So I think there's a basic element here, which is when it comes to the novelty factor, our happiness from possessions, from indulgences, tends to reflect how much emotional engagement we get with those things. So, for example, when we buy our first 60-inch flat screen 4K TV, the day we buy it, we're like, that's awesome. That thing is so cool. I have the coolest house, entertainment center, whatever in the world. And a month later, it's just your TV. It's become part of the norm. You've absorbed the happiness that obtaining this new thing brought you. And it doesn't mean you won't continue to enjoy the benefits of it, but you no longer have an emotional response to it because the wow factor is gone. Whereas when you take a month long trip to Vietnam and you bicycle around and historical sites and you meet the people and try the culture, you're having this protracted emotional experience from that experience as opposed to the short lived emotional experience of buying a TV.
I feel like I would see this a lot with cars as well, like buying your dream car, buying the car that you've always dreamed of, that you have a poster of in your room, and then once you have it, people just park it. So this is kind of where I'm, like, seeing that, where it's like, what is it that causes all of that excitement? And then once you have it, it's kinda like the norm, it's just there. And you can say that you have it, but it's not nothing like the process of looking at dealerships, going to the place, driving it around, testing multiple cars. it just becomes something that you just have.
Well, and human beings are goal driven, right? We like having pursuits. And so sometimes the pursuit of the dream car or the dream house was more fun than obtaining it, than having it. And again, not to say you can't really love your dream car. I'll give my personal example. I've never bought a luxury vehicle of any sort. I'm not a car person. I can't tell you the difference between a Shelby Cobra and a Mustang other than the name. I don't know anything about cars. But I have decided that the next car I buy will be some version of a luxury model. Nothing super crazy, but it'll be like a Lexus or something, and I will do that so that I can say I've had the experience and enjoyed the experience and made a determination about whether I thought it really made a big difference in my quality of life. And then after that car is done, I will either continue to do it because I'll find out that it was worth it for me, or I'll go back to driving consumer cars, and that's okay. I think at the end of the day, your money is a reflection of your values. I think there's a really good observation out there, which is when somebody tells you what they value, ask to see their budget because their budget will tell you what they value. And I think that's the same thing around happiness. But when it comes to the buying the one big thing, I've been saving for this thing for so long and now I have it. Again, it just becomes this question of what was the emotional engagement with that thing or not. We have some clients who are huge cyclists. They ride hundreds of miles a week. They love it. And I'm sure that they get elation buying their new carbon frame 17-gram bicycle that and they probably continue to enjoy it every time they ride it, but the riding it is the greater joy, not the bicycle. The bicycle is enabling the experience that causes that joy.
With our clients and the people that we work with today, what is something that you suggest clients to spend more money on?
We have to bifurcate here because some of our clients are maxed out financially. I'm not saying that they're in trouble or something, but they don't have the bandwidth to splurge necessarily or to spend more money on things. And so I want to be conscious and cognizant that as we talk about what should people spend more money on, I'm not telling people to shuffle their existing financial priorities if that's not something that enables their goals. But we do have a healthy number of clients where every time we sit down, every time we have a meeting, we ask them what's new, what's going on, how are you doing? And we find out at some point in the course of the conversation, or we're having a repeated conversation about how they're saving enough, they're investing enough, they have their emergency fund, their debts are paid off, or they're on track to be paid off, and they're so low interest that they shouldn't speed that up because there's better opportunities for them. They're doing everything they need to accomplish all the life goals they've stated, and they are still piling up cash. And then the question becomes, okay, with all of that in mind, if we're still piling up cash, we're accomplishing all our life goals and whatnot, what should we do? The biggest places that I think people should try to find some enjoyment would be in the quality of their travel or the time amount of time on their travel. I think because travel is highly kind of research shows that travel is a big positive life experience. So I think people with abundance or with extra should do more of that or should do it in higher quality, right? Fly first class, stay at a nicer resort, drive a nicer rental car, whatever those things are to you, or take more cruises and do more excursions. Again, whatever your style of travel is. I think another one is buying back time. And I'm going to pick on my parents for this just for a second. My parents are getting up there in age, and to this day, they still clean their own house. And I'm like, hey guys, you definitely can afford, even as retirees. I know you've got a lot of free time, but you can afford to have somebody clean your house. You don't have to do this yourself. So there's little examples like that where I think a lot of people fail to buy back time or basic quality of life things. And this can even get into your diet. Plenty of people here in Longmont like to shop at King Supers. I get my groceries from King Supers, but I won't lie. If Whole Foods was as close to me as King Supers was, I'd probably shop at Whole Foods instead, if only for the moderate increase in quality. But at the end of the day, I think it's just about little quality of life things. And the trick is, as a culture, we're very debt averse and we sort of judge people who spend more money as they do better in life, right? We use the phrase lifestyle creep. I think lifestyle expansion is a wonderful thing as long as you are adjusting your responsible behaviors commensurately with your changes in income and your changes in quality of life. I think it is judgmental to just say, "Oh, you make more money now and now you spend more money. That's bad." No, what the money has no intrinsic purpose or value. It's what it buys you in life from experiences, from quality of life, from what it lets you do for your children. All of those things I think are the much more valuable thing than just having more money. So all of that to then say, to answer your question, people should spend more money on enjoying their lives, whatever that means in their unique and individualized definition of a great life.
Their happiness. Whatever makes them happy. What's something people shouldn't spend so much money on?
I think people spend a lot of money on things that they're told they should have that they don't really actually derive any value from. The example that I'll see is you see a lot of people going out there like door to door and selling pest control services or selling like a special AI enabled doorbell, like all these various little things that people are like, oh, like you want to protect your family, don't you? You want to protect your house from pests, don't you? You want. But then for all the clients that we see that are paying for these things, we also have clients who are not paying for these things and we see no difference, right? Like our clients without the fancy AI doorbell are not then complaining about all the burglaries they get. The clients who are not paying for the pest control subscription where somebody comes and sprays poison around your house every quarter are not complaining that they're being overrun with pests and termites or something. So it's one of those things where I think you just want to be mindful when you do make these consumption decisions. I don't think there's a category of spend less. I think it's more about think hard about why you have the things you have, why you pay for the things you pay for. Are these things that you pursued, that you wanted, that you thought were necessary in your life? Or were these things that somebody told you had to have? I'm going to make one exception here because somebody's going to try to call me out on this, and I know exactly who's going to do it, which is if your financial planner tells you you need more life insurance or more disability insurance or you need an estate plan, you do actually need those things. So don't start scrimping on those and saying, Dan, you told me I need these, but I didn't want these, so I don't want them. No, you do need to have insurance to take care of your family and an estate plan to take care of your family if something happens to you.
I mean, another one that I wanted to mention was like influencers. There's a lot of stuff in social media, like with influencers trying to promote stuff. And it's so easy to just double click to buy something. And with your address and your card information already being there, it's so easy for people to just double click and get the order and have it delivered to your house. And with influencers being so good at literally what they do, influencing people on stuff that might not be useful, it's so easy to just buy it and just like get it delivered to your house.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing. I mean, here's a great just rule of thumb in general: never buy something because somebody you watch on YouTube or TikTok says you should, because they're being paid to tell you that you should. And they always say like, I've been a user of fill in the blank for don't buy anything like that. And
I
they're lying. They're lying to you for money, and we all know it. But like it's like, well, I really do like the Fat Electrician You channel. If he says
yeah.
that I needed this identity theft service, no, no, I don't. Don't buy stuff because people tell you you need stuff. Buy stuff because you genuinely want it.
Yeah, a big one with that that I've been seeing a lot is skincare, where it's like the influencers are saying, "Oh, I've been using this for a whole month," and you can see the biggest pimple in their forehead or whatever, and it's they're literally just getting paid for it. So,
There you go.
yep. And then so my last question here was, what happens when one spouse loves to splurge and then the other one hates making big purchases like that?
So, I mean, you see this in money scripts when you see one spouse has a strong money worship script and one has a strong, essentially, script for like money vigilance or money focus. Those are slightly different things, but essentially they're very like penny pinchy or cautious about how much money they have. And one person is obviously very okay with spending. The basic thing here is you have to reconcile a balance. One of you has to acknowledge that you get stressed out when you spend money. One of you has to acknowledge that you're unhappy when you can't spend money and you need to compromise on what a reasonable degree of spending is. And then the one who likes to spend needs to stay within the boundaries. And the one who does not like to spend needs to sit on their hands and let their spouse spend up to that limit and not be so crazy if they go over it by $5.
That's a good way to go about it, I think. It gives them the ability to make their purchases and buy whatever they want, but it doesn't get to the point where it makes the other person uncomfortable. And I feel like with this, it also communication comes back to the picture where it's like you just have to talk about it. You can't just go behind your spouse's back and start buying stuff and expect it's not going to happen or not do anything.
Well, and going behind your spouse's back is classified as financial infidelity. That is not okay. But you have to go into the conversation up front saying, look, you're going to tell me I'm not allowed to spend as much as I want, and I'm going to tell you that I want to spend more than you want me to. And we both have to agree that both of us are going to be a little unhappy with the end result here, but that the purpose is, again, not to die on a pile of gold, and it's not to die broke. It's to live a good quality of life while being reasonably balanced between each of us. Now, if you can't find a number that you agree on, right? So I want to spend 100, I want to spend 0%, and neither of you will budge. Now we're getting into the domain of family therapy.
Yeah, that becomes an issue, especially when the Amazon packages start to show up in the front door.
Well, and here's the thing, like my dining room table is a temple of Amazon boxes every day. Also, most of what my wife buys is not expensive, is not crazy, is well within our means. So then not like, oh gosh, there's a retail temple that's for that we're being buried in and we're going to go broke. No, it all fits within budget. We're not going into credit card debt or anything like that to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my last topic is reverse mortgages, and we touched on it on what I learned this week on my last podcast. So I just wanted to go more into that on why they have a bad reputation and where that reputation came from, or why they make people feel nervous right away.
I mean, the basic answers when these products first came out, they were predatory and chirps. Like the very early versions were essentially mortgages collateralized by your home. And if the mortgage got underwater, then they could threaten to foreclose. And that was an issue. I think most of the bad reputation today has more. I'll say most of the deserved bad reputation today has to do with the legacy of that, or has to do with people having a "I want my cake and eat it too" perspective, which is just like I want extra income in retirement, and also I still want all the equity in my house, and I'm mad that I don't have both of those things. And I think the third version of that sometimes that comes along is sometimes mom or dad had a reverse mortgage and the kids didn't know, and they think they're going to inherit a whole house, and then mom and dad pass away, and it turns out there's only like $50,000 of equity left in the house, and they're mad about it. All those are fair things for people to have strong feelings about, but in practice, why do they have a bad reputation originally? They used to be predatory, they are not predatory anymore, but some people still don't like that you can't have it both ways.
Has your opinion on reverse mortgages from like when you started to now changed over your career?
I went from neutral slash uninformed to well informed and positive on. I don't think reverse mortgages are a good solution for everybody, but the academic research on reverse mortgages is phenomenal. Right, a ton of people in America retire with more home equity than retirement savings, or literally might have the majority of their wealth in real estate and not be able to live on it or use it. I think the place where it becomes suitable then is for somebody who's like, this is just a house I bought 5 years ago, and I'm going to live in it and die in it, and it has no financial significance or emotional significance to my family. Reverse mortgages are an incredibly useful and effective tool. I think they're a bad fit for people who plan to relocate. And I think they're a bad fit for people who are like, this is the family home and I want to leave it to the next six generations. But that's again, I think I'll sort of have the square peg in the round hole problem where they look at it and say, it's not for me because, and that's okay. But I think they're a much more effective tool than people think they are.
So going a little deeper on what you just mentioned about how the house is supposed to be a family home and it's going to be transferred over for the next six generations. What impact does reverse mortgages have on that?
Well, that's the big problem, right? If we spend the equity in the home, then eventually when we either have to sell the home, move out of the home, or we pass away, we either don't have the home anymore or we have a mortgage on the home again. And that people don't. You're not forced to sell it at some point when you pass away, but your family is going from inheriting a whole house with all the equity in it to inheriting a house that needs to be refinanced with a traditional 30-year, 15-year mortgage. And that's going to put you in a position where maybe that's not the greatest experience as an inheritor, but again, that's where I would say you have the five generation family home. Unless you have no other choice, you probably don't want to do a reverse mortgage. But if this is just some stucco box you bought in Phoenix to retire in or Scottsdale or whatever it is, and when you die, you fully expect your kids are just going to sell it, then it probably doesn't matter so much.
Okay, so once the homeowner passes away or whoever had the homeowner had a reverse mortgage, once they pass away, they essentially have to start buying the home again, like whoever inherits the house or not inherits, but like decides to buy the house if it's one of the family members. So starting from zero again.
I mean, there's whatever amount of debt there was. So let's say you took out a mortgage, a reverse mortgage at 65 and you passed away at 67, there's a little debt on the house. Let's say you took it out at 65 and you pass away at 90, there's a lot of debt on the house. And it is a mortgage when you're getting lent money every month or you have access to a line of credit, the same as a HELOC, except the condition here is that you don't have to make payments on it. Like that's the special thing about reverse mortgages versus traditional mortgages or reverse mortgages versus HELOCs is that no payments are required. The trade-off then is that you are accruing debt. Every month you receive that paycheck, or every time you borrow against that line of credit, you now owe money. It accrues interest, and it's all collateralized against the value of your home. So at worst, you lose the house, right? There's no equity in the house whatsoever. But the big thing back in the predatory days is that you could end up underwater, could foreclose you or force you to give them money to make up for the difference. They can't do that anymore. So now the worst thing that happens is the house is not inherited by the family, or the house is inherited by the family, but they now need to take out a mortgage and pay back the debt that was taken on by mom and dad. And they could then make the decision to keep the house and do that, or to go ahead and sell it and off the debt with the collateral and keep whatever difference there is.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see. So when somebody is looking at their options and they look at a reverse mortgage and other different options, what other options should they stress out first before taking the reverse mortgage? Or I guess I should say, is reverse mortgage an option that should be considered one of the first options?
The research suggests that reverse mortgages are one of the best first options, actually. And this is
Oh,
sort of the classic misuse scenario. What a lot of people do is they treat reverse mortgages as a tool of last resort or as a kind of last option. So they'll spend all their IRA money, they'll spend all their 401k money, they'll spend down their checking, they'll spend down their savings, they'll burn up all their financial resources but their home equity, and then they'll take out the reverse. And that reverse can still be helpful for them. But what the research shows and what the math really shows is that reverse mortgages are incredibly powerful tools either for preserving more liquid, higher quality assets like a diversified investment portfolio, retirement accounts, or Roth money, for example, your Roth IRA as a good case, or they're really good at helping you hedge against market downturns. So again, there's two versions of reverse mortgage. One of them is essentially an annuity where you get a check every month. One of them is essentially a line of credit that you don't have to make payments. Let's say you bought into your house, you retired, it's 2007, and suddenly your stock portfolio is taking a 30, 40, 50, 60% hit. Question: are you better off selling your stocks at a 30, 40, 50, or 60% discount to live on, or are you better borrowing on this reverse mortgage? Maybe you have 7 to 10% interest. It's not cheap, but you don't have to make payments on it ever. And as long as you live in the house, you don't have to repay the loan at any point. And then with that, you borrow from 2007 through 2009. You wait for the market to recover. You don't sell any of your investments at a 30, 40, 50, 60% discount. The market recovers. And then if you really don't want to have that debt, you sell some of your stocks at a non discount and pay off the debt, right? Like that, the mechanism where reverse mortgages can be super, super helpful. And again, they're not right for everybody, but it's one of those things where a lot of people just have this ick feeling about them because, as I mentioned earlier, we have this deep societal, cultural bias against debt, but debt is a financial tool like anything else. And so it's something that I think a lot of people dismiss out of hand without really thinking about the efficacy of that kind of tool.
this can also be very helpful for people who don't have anybody that they want to leave their assets to. So if it's just somebody who is living on their own and doesn't necessarily want to, or has the desire to leave their home to somebody else or their kids or something like that, I feel like this is a good option that can be considered right away as a first option, but because of the reputation, it's so easy for them to just dismiss that option and completely disregard that tool that they have in hand. At what point do you suggest that to clients? At what point do you say, trust me, I do know what I'm talking about here. Like, this is a good option for you.
Well, I mean, I think that gets into the territory of appeals to authority. Like, all of our clients know I have a PhD in financial planning. Like, all of our clients know I'm a CFP. I think there people know or accept or believe Dan knows what he's talking about. But at the end of the day, our job is not to browbeat our clients into doing what we think is best for them. We're here to serve as a guide. And in that capacity, we're here to help clients make the best decisions for themselves in the conditions that they're willing to work within. So we have plenty of clients where we've done them all and said, look, your retirement's sort of questionable. You may need to work longer. You may need to save, or we may need to be a little more aggressive with your investments. Or an option that would help you is a reverse mortgage. I hear that and I see that and I'll think about it if it gets serious, but I don't want to do that. Okay, that's fine. I'm here to say, no, you must go get a reverse mortgage.
Yeah.
I don't want that to be the message anybody takes away. And I don't want them to take that away from any advice we give them. It's very rare that I'm going to have a foot down thing where I say, you do this or it doesn't work. That's very rare. It's just a question of what choices do you want to make and what trade offs are you willing to accept.
So when somebody has decided to go that route of getting a reverse mortgage, what questions should somebody get answered before going through the process? Or what should they make sure before starting the process?
More than any, just so everybody's aware, you have to take a class before you can get a reverse mortgage. You can't just walk into a bank and say, I want a reverse, and they'll write you up that day. You have to go through an education course. And I think if anybody thinks that a reverse mortgage could be helpful for them, a great place to start is just to go through that education course because it's going to answer all the technical questions. It's going to lay out the different types of products in that space and the different terms and conditions. It's just going to make you really well educated on that subject. There's also a really great book by Wade Pfau on reverse mortgage. That's a pretty good read if somebody wants to read it bit more academic or in passing and not have to take a class. But I think that's the best place to start. Is just look, if you think there's any applicability to you, get educated on it, right? Or come talk to us, ask us questions. We're happy to, of course, share more about it. But at the end of the day, the core decision need is this a thing I would ever entertain? If I would never entertain it, what's my sticking point? My classic example would be like it's the family home. If it's never a choice you'd ever indulge in, don't bother. But if thing where just I don't like it, why don't you like it? And if you've heard something in the course of this podcast where you go, well, okay, I don't like it, but they talked about that version of why I don't like it or why I think it's a bad idea. Maybe I should learn more about it. And that's great. But that's the core thing. I don't think anybody should just jump up from this podcast and go, I need a reverse mortgage. And I don't think anybody on earth should say, I would never need a reverse mortgage. I think you need to think about your individualized circumstances and plan and get educated accordingly.
Okay. Well, that's all I had for today's podcast.
Made it easy, and we did make it to the as asked for subject. So well done there. What have we learned about in the last week or two that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so this week with a school coming up here in August, this week I learned that giving money to a child for college isn't as straightforward as it seems. So depending on how and when the money is gifted, it can affect the student's eligibility for need-based financial aid. So for example, if a student receives cash directly and it's treated as income in financial aid process, it can have a bigger impact than if the money comes from a parent owed 529. So, from the article, Does a 529 Plan Affect Financial Aid by Jeffrey Trull, I found that parent owed 529s are assessed as parental assets on the FAFSA at a maximum rate of 5.64, while student owned 529s are assessed at a much higher 20% income. And then grandparent owned 529s are not reported at all. So, I just thought those were pretty good points that I saw.
Yeah, I mean, paying for college is literally like the subject of multiple books and all sorts of things there, and we could certainly talk about that more. But the biggest take, I think, from the last couple of weeks that's come up in some of our client conversations is if you want to help somebody with college, whatever you do, don't give them money. There's better places for that money to be than just giving it to them.
And that's just crazy to think about. It's like, I don't know, it's just giving money, but it can affect financial aid a lot. So it's just things to think about.
There you go.
The Science of Wealth is produced by My Wealth Planners, a registered investment advisor in Colorado. The theme song is This Is Your Time by Dan Phillips. The podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not investment advice or any other form of advice. Not all material discussed on the podcast is appropriate for every individual in every circumstance, so you should consult with a certified financial planner, tax professional, or legal professional as appropriate before attempting to apply any of the subjects, strategies, or tactics discussed on the podcast.